Iran is in a panic and going on high alert for an immediate attack on its nuclear facilities by the United States and Israel, while Hamas is backing down from its maximum list of demands after a bruising confrontation with Israel. But it's not only Israel that is demanding Hamas disarm. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are making the same demands, while Egypt and Qatar are opposing this idea so far. This is the only one of many disagreements that have emerged between the Gulf states, Egypt, and Qatar over the future of the Gaza Strip in general and Hamas in particular. However, Israeli negotiators are saying they see a hardening in the position of Hamas due to the growing self-confidence as the deal progresses. But the Americans are pushing back against this, including an announcement by President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. He stated that he is postponing his arrival in this region in order to apply pressure on Hamas. In northern Samaria, the intense fight against the terror organizations continues, and we'll talk about how the IDF is pursuing the terror battalions of Jenin and Tulkarem. We'll also talk about another mega attack that was thwarted by the security services following the bus explosions last week and many smaller scale incidents. In recent days, dozens of terrorist suspects were arrested, some in the late stages of planning attacks, including shootings in Hawara and planting a 100-kilogram explosive device against IDF forces. In the northern arena, there is a growing awareness that Israel's operations in Lebanon have created a serious deterrent effect. Lebanon's new prime minister has publicly said that his country will not serve as a platform for an attack against any country. TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will give us a glimpse into what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East, and he'll take us to see how President Trump is canceling a memorandum from the Biden administration intended to pressure Israel to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. And further afield, European security agencies have reported that Hamas terrorists plan to target Jewish institutions there, and 4 terrorists from Hamas stood trial in Germany on suspicion that they planned a large-scale terrorist attack on the Israeli embassy, an American military base, and an airport. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 508 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups that are operating in this region under the leadership of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to invite you to click that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. We start our news report with Hamas senior official Musa Abu Marzouk, who told the New York Times in an interview published this week that I would have opposed October 7th if I had known what the consequences would be. However, Hamas soon issued a statement that the article quoted him was out of context, and in any case, it is apparent that most of his colleagues don't agree. In fact, on Monday afternoon, the IDF announced that a rocket launched from Gaza towards Israel fell within the Gaza Strip, and later, the Air Force attacked the launch area in Rafah. This is happening as we head into the end of the week and approaching the month of Ramadan, the most religious month in Islam. Past experiences show that Ramadan is not only a month of fasting from morning until evening and family celebrations every night, but also a period in which terrorist organizations and lone individuals embark on murderous attacks. This obligates the IDF, the Shin Bet, and the police to keep an eye out and remain on high alert in all nearby and distant areas. That includes northern Samaria, where the Shin Bet announced on Tuesday evening that it had thwarted a shooting attack planned by a terrorist cell in Hawara, and, in parallel, thwarted an attack on IDF forces in northern Samaria using a 100-kilogram explosive device. In light of the information that emerged in the interrogation of 2 suspects that were arrested on the way to carry out the shooting attack, additional cell members were arrested last night in a joint IDF and Shin Bet operation in the city of Kabatia in northern Samaria. This follows what almost everyone agrees was a miracle last week, in which a disaster was diverted when explosive devices planted on buses in central Israeli cities detonated prematurely, resulting in no casualties. However, this signals a worrying pattern. Just since the beginning of 2025, the Shin Bet has succeeded in stopping more than 150 major attacks, including 45 explosive devices attacks. In 2024, 1,040 significant attacks were thwarted, 326 of which were explosive device attacks. The IDF encounters them regularly in the refugee camps of Judea and Samaria, as well as explosive devices with such greater destructive potential placed on roads and packed with dozens of kilograms of explosives. Add to that the failure to stop weapon smuggling, as a result of which the Jenin battalions are armed to the teeth, inspired by ISIS and other terror methods. They are also motivated to carry out attacks by the absence of entry permits for Palestinian workers, alongside the constant infiltration of illegal residents. The situation led the IDF to increase activity in northern Samaria, to deploy tanks for the first time in 23 years, and to station a battalion in the Jenin and Tulkarem area, conducting continuous raids into the camp. This route treatment also includes preventing the residents who left following the IDF activity from returning, until the army finishes cleaning up this area completely. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue updating you on every development in the Samaria sector and on the war against the Hamas terrorist organization. And as always, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and of course, click on the subscribe button if you haven't already. And most importantly, don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, switching our focus to the Gaza Strip, the ceasefire has already lasted a number of weeks, intended for the purpose of carrying out the hostage release deal. For better and for worse, it is considered out of the order to talk much about this deal or address its severe implications for Israel's security, but it turns out that on the other side of the border, they aren't sitting idly by. Hamas is not spending most of its time organizing sickening release ceremonies for the hostages. That might be what they want us to think. But behind the scenes, it is preparing for a war with Israel, for another attack on the Gaza communities surrounding the Gaza Strip, and perhaps even for a new round of abductions of Israelis and IDF troops. In recent days, the IDF has raised its alert level on the Gaza border in anticipation for a possible renewal of fighting in the Gaza Strip. This escalation in alertness was carried out under the direct order of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and members of the Israeli Security Cabinet. The IDF has massed forces and reinforced its activities in the areas around the Gaza Strip and the Israeli communities surrounding it. This is also in light of indications that the Hamas terrorist organization intends and is capable of carrying out terror activities against Israel. Hamas is reorganizing in the Gaza Strip, and the IDF is preparing for a broad ground and air operation in response. 35 days of the ceasefire have given Hamas space to rebuild its capabilities, reorganize, reconstitute companies and battalions, and prepare again for an attack against Israel. According to the report, Hamas's military buildup does not end with a military display during the hostage release ceremonies. Thousands of Hamas terrorists went up to the northern part of the Gaza Strip after the Netzarim corridor was opened and blended in with hundreds of thousands of Gazans who streamed north. Among other things, Hamas terrorists began repairing terror tunnels that were bombed by the IDF, digging new underground facilities, and preparing new explosive device zones intended to harm the IDF soldiers if they again attempt a ground maneuver into the Gaza Strip. The defense establishment has also identified several locations where terrorists have placed rocket launchers in preparation for an attack against Israel, and in other areas, surveillance cameras have been deployed to enable targeting of IDF soldiers from a distance. It is assessed that the failed rocket launch yesterday from Rafah and other similar incidents recently stem from that same Hamas activity preparing launchers for an attack against Israel. It appears that the launches were carried out by mistake during the preparation of the launchers for operation in the future. In response, the IDF is completing preparations for a broad ground and air operation, also with reserve brigades. And according to a military source, Hamas is very damaged with gaps in command and control and in weaponry. But there is still much work to be done to defeat this organization militarily. However, it is not all bad news on this front. After strenuous negotiations and drama, Hamas is backing down on some of its maximalist demands, and it is possible that they will release the remains of deceased hostages in exchange for the installment of Palestinian security prisoners, their release that was supposed to take place in the last phase. Israel has received backing from the Trump administration for the decision to delay the release of hundreds of Palestinian terrorists from prisons in Israel. The White House announced earlier this week that this is an appropriate response and that President Donald Trump supports it. Brian Hodges, spokesperson for the White House National Security Council, said, in light of Hamas's barbaric treatment of the hostages, including the horrifying parade of the Bibas children's coffins through the streets of Gaza, Israel's decision to delay the release of prisoners is an appropriate response. The president is ready to support Israel in any measure it decides to take against Hamas. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's advisor to the Middle East affairs, is scheduled to arrive in Israel next Wednesday to renew contacts for continuing the hostage deal and to overcome the current crisis. In an interview with CNN, Witkoff gave backing to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and said that he's motivated by the right considerations. Hamas cannot be part of any government in the Gaza Strip, and that the United States expect the second phase of the deal to be carried out. He added, we need an extension of the first phase. We hope we will have enough time to start the second phase, finish it, and release more hostages. And meanwhile, senior Hamas official Bassem Naim announced that Hamas will not hold talks with Israel through mediators on further steps under the fragile ceasefire agreement unless the Palestinian prisoners are released from prison as agreed. Political sources in Jerusalem say that the first step will be to resolve the deadlock that arose in the deal, to receive this week the bodies of another 4 hostages, then to release the hundreds of terrorists and try to extend the first phase of the hostage deal and secure the release of additional hostages. The political echelon is also attempting to extend the first phase of the deal in exchange for extending the ceasefire and increasing the entry of humanitarian aid, caravans, and heavy construction equipment into the Gaza Strip. Political officials estimate that Hamas has no interest in renewing the fighting ahead of the start of the month of Ramadan next week, and that it believes it has enough Israeli hostages in its possession to obtain further concessions from Israel, such as releasing top terrorists that Israel has so far refused to free. On that subject, this coming Thursday, Hamas is supposed to release the remains of 4 hostages who died in captivity, and immediately thereafter, Israel is supposed to begin withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor in accordance with the agreement. However, the current assessment by political sources is that Israel will try to postpone the withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, which is bordering between Gaza and Egypt, with the help of Steve Witkoff. This will bring the first phase of the ceasefire agreement to a close, and it is still unclear what will happen with the second phase, but Steve Witkoff will soon meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss Israel's options. The gaps between Israel's position and Hamas's are enormous. Political sources say that Israel will make an effort to free as many living hostages as possible, but senior security officials believe that the negotiations will stop at some point when the differences become too large to bridge, and then Israel will be on its way to renewing the fighting in the Gaza Strip. I will only say, according to a source, that Israel aims to create buffer zones in the northern and eastern Gaza Strip and also to completely dismantle Hamas's military capabilities during the second phase. According to my sources, even though the IDF is supposed to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor entirely during this stage, it does not intend to do so. And in any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on every development regarding the release of our hostages and the continued elimination of Hamas. And once again, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share our videos on YouTube, and follow us on social media. And most importantly, don't forget to click that subscribe button so that you'll stay tuned to the truth and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. One moment before we move on to why Iran is in a panic and whether Israel and the United States might attack Iran at any moment, let's go to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will explain to us why the President of the United States is erasing his predecessor's legacy with some dramatic decisions regarding our neighborhood here in the Middle East. So, over to you, Mati.
Thank you, Yair. So, as we're talking about, the Trump administration in these last weeks rolls back a series of rules and regulations that the Biden administration had put in place that regard or relate to selling munitions to the State of Israel. And specifically, these rules talk about the use case scenario of the weapons sold to Israel, and more specifically, the use of large-scale bombs, a series of what is known as the Mark 84 bombs, 1 ton or 1 metric ton bombs that are used by the Israeli Air Force. What the Biden administration had in place was a rule that says that they want to ensure that the use of those bombs fits the criteria of international law, of non-lethal use against civilians, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, just making sure that they can guarantee to a certain degree of certainty that the munitions won't be used against civilians' targets, or they won't come back to shame or a sensitive scenario where the U.S. administration isn't happy with the use of those bombs. What the Trump administration says is, no, we don't want to do that. We want to give the full support to the Israeli government to use those bombs in a way that they see fit. Not only that, the Trump administration releases over 1,800 of those bombs that were held back by the Biden administration and sends them to Israel. Just a couple days ago, those series of 1,800 one-ton bombs arrive at the port of Ashdod to be used by the Israeli Air Force. Now, what does the Israeli Air Force use these bombs for? It uses them to level buildings and hard targets that Hezbollah, Hamas terrorists would use to hide in, but not only them, also the terrorists of the Houthi organization in Yemen, who are fully funded by the Iranians, and even the Iranians themselves. The Trump administration says something clear in this series of action. It says to the State of Israel, look guys, we know you do everything you can not to hurt civilian targets. We know you're our allies, and we want to support whatever defensive steps you need to take as a country, and do that by giving you the munitions. There's a lot of criticism within the US government, specifically from Democratic members of the previous government, who are speaking against what the Trump administration is doing, saying that it sort of unleashes the Israeli government and other allies that would seek to receive the same kind of support. It unleashes them to do things that are illegal according to American law. But the truth, of course, is far more complicated than that, as it always is in this part of the world. So when the Trump administration, in such a clear way, signals that it is fully supportive of Israel's use of American weaponry, knowing full well that Israel will use it for the right purpose and the purposes intended by the American government when arming the Israeli people, it sends several strong signals. One, it's a signal to the people sitting in the Israeli government that the US government is behind them and supportive of them. But the second one, and more importantly, is part of the US ongoing campaign of maximum pressure against Iranian interest in this region. And what it is the American government signaling to the Iranians that they will support Israel, that they will give Israel the right and the ability to use full force to bomb and harm Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi, and more importantly, Iranian targets if the need comes up. Now, why would that happen? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One, America has been incredibly supportive of the State of Israel, also under the Biden administration. They've given us more weaponry in this last 15 months of war than any administration in the past, and they've done so by publicly supporting at the same time Israel on the diplomatic, the military, and the financial level of this war. But it gets more complicated and it gets more interesting than that. The Trump administration, by doing what they did these last days, is also signaling that the ongoing campaign to pressure the Iranians through their proxies and through other interests in this region is not something that they were just talking about. They're giving us the munitions, the finances, the diplomatic support, the UN support, and more so, they're sort of saying in a very, very direct way, these are our allies. We want to make sure they can defend themselves. And when we talk about unlimited pressure against the Iranians, this is what it looks like. Here's a huge stockpile of weapons that the Israeli Air Force can use against the Iranians in the Middle East. So there's another interest on the table here, and that's the financial interest. When the US government allows American companies to sell as many weapon systems as they need to Israeli and other allies in the Middle East, it unleashes the American economy to grow and to prosper under this current Trump administration. But more so, it allows American companies to sell weapons to Israel and other allies in this region without the concern of political considerations slowing down or stopping those kind of trade deals. And that's something important. It's important for the Israeli government and army to know that when they need the munitions they need to fight the wars against the 6, 7, or 8 fronts we're fighting at one time, we'll be able to get them quickly and without a lot of red tape from the American government. And the Saudis are looking and seeing the same thing. And the Iranians are looking and they see the same thing. That when America stands behind its allies, it happens quickly and without any unnecessary hurdles to go through. In any case, it's always interesting days ahead of us, but it's good to know that the support given to Israel by the American government is stronger than ever before. Now back to you, Yair.
Thank you, Mati, for clarifying that for us. And now, a moment before we proceed, I want to invite you to once again click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we switch our focus to Iran, which is in a panic over the possibility that Israel and the Americans might be getting ready to hit their nuclear facilities with a massive airstrike. Iran's air defense forces are desperately trying to find ways to increase the protection from such strikes and increase their readiness ahead of a possible action. Details of these preparations were revealed this week by the Western intelligence agencies and even senior officials inside the Iranian regime, and were outlined in a report in the British Telegraph news portal. And according to the report, Iran has deployed new defensive systems at many sensitive sites, including unknown locations, and anticipates an attack every night. On Tuesday morning, a former United States ambassador to Israel said an attack in Iran could happen as early as this year. And two senior officials in the Iranian government quoted in the report added that Iran has also increased alerts around the country's missile launch sites and has deployed new air defensive systems, although that claim has not yet been verified. And Western intelligence officials said, however, that the Iranians are convincing themselves every night that the attack is on its way. They're just waiting tensely every single night and day. It's stretching them to their limits. The report also said that a series of recent publications in United States media portals about Israel's preparations for an attack are fueling the Iranian fears. The significant weakening of Iran's proxies, such as Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, severely harmed the regime in Tehran, making it even more vulnerable in light of Trump's stance against it. Since returning to the White House, Trump has renewed the maximum pressure campaign policy against Iran, aimed at preventing it from obtaining nuclear weapons and reducing its oil exports to zero. Netanyahu said this week that with Trump's support, Israel will finish the job with Iran, but analysts believe it's unlikely that Israel can destroy Iran's nuclear program without help from the United States military. However, in recent months, Trump has stated on various occasions that he prefers to reach an agreement with Iran rather than attack it militarily. But he also said that it is clear that he is considering military actions if negotiations will fail. A senior Iranian official who spoke with the Telegraph said that there is now concern in Tehran that the United States might join in and launch a large-scale attack that could endanger the existence of the Islamic Republic. In related news, the United States Treasury Department announced on Monday that the United States is imposing sanctions on more than 30 people and vessels for their role in the sale and transport of products related to Iranian oil as part of Tehran's shadow fleet of tankers. And according to a report by Reuters, the sanctions target oil agents in the United Arab Emirates and in Hong Kong, logistics personnel and tanker operations in India and China, as well as the head of Iran's national Iranian oil company and the Iranian oil terminals company. The announcement stressed that sanctions were imposed on tens of millions of barrels of crude oil worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And according to Reuters, the newly imposed sanctions build on sanctions that were previously imposed by the Biden administration and target central sectors of Iran's economy in order to prevent the government from obtaining funds for its nuclear and missile programs. The measure generally prohibits any American individuals or entities from doing business with the targets and freezes any assets that are held in the United States. So please keep spreading the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and clicking that subscribe button. Help us share the truth. Here at TBN Israel, we also provide a news website so you can stay informed in between the videos. So head over to tbnisrael.com and stay tuned to the truth in real time. Now, we move on to a report from the heart of Europe, where security forces in Germany broke up a cell of 4 suspected terrorists identifying with Hamas. They are now standing trial in Germany on suspicion of planning to target Jewish institutions in Europe. They are also accused of attempting to locate a secret weapons depot in Poland for future attacks. According to the publication in the German newspaper Der Spiegel, the 4 discussed among themselves targets such as the Israeli embassy in Berlin, the American airbase Ramstein in Germany, and another target in an airport area in Berlin, the nature of which was not specified. The report went on to say that the cell received instructions from the senior Hamas official Khalil Haraz in Lebanon, who was eliminated in an IDF strike in November, which made it difficult for the cell members to continue their mission. Now, they have the distinction of being accused in the first legal case against an armed militia of an Islamic group in Germany, as reported on Tuesday by the Reuters news agency. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on these events going forward, and we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll never miss another episode. Now, I want to share something close to my heart: the Rebuild Israel campaign. Since the events of October 7, 2023, our beloved Israel, especially the northern regions, has faced significant challenges. Communities have been deeply affected, and the need for restoration is immense. In response, TBN Israel has launched the Rebuild Israel initiative, focusing on revitalizing these areas. One of our main goals is to plant new forests, turning areas touched by conflict into green, thriving spaces. This isn't just about trees, it's about bringing life and hope back to this land. Recently, Mati, Shoshani and I had the privilege of participating in this mission firsthand. We went out to plant trees ourselves, and during the shoot, something remarkable happened. The skies opened up and it began to rain. This unexpected downpour felt like a blessing, a sign of rejuvenation and new beginnings. So we're offering you, supporters of Israel, a unique opportunity to leave a lasting legacy. Imagine a beautiful forest named in honor of millions of supporters of the State of Israel and its people, standing as a testament to our collective commitment to Israel's future. Picture your grandchildren visiting this forest, walking among the trees that you helped plant, and experiencing the beauty and peace that you've contributed to. It's a gift that keeps on giving, a living legacy for generations to come. If you want to support this project and help us rebuild Israel, please visit www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Your support is invaluable, and together we can bring new life to the land that we hold so dear. So thank you for standing with us and supporting the Rebuild Israel campaign. And the most important thing that you can do is unite in prayer. Please pray for the hostages to come home after being held by Hamas for more than 500 days. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are risking their lives every day defending the people of Israel and fighting on multiple fronts in Judea and Samaria, in the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, or in Syria. Pray for all the civilians that are affected by these terrorist organizations, also inside the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Israel, that God will comfort them in these hard times. And most importantly, please unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.